Hi, Nesha. So I'm so glad you've been able to join us today. We're in the middle of teaching DPL 2020, and we're doing this course about education, agency, and change. And we've been thinking a lot about metaphors and stories and the assumptions that we bring to educational spaces. You and I used to teach together, reinventing education, and we overhauled it together and developed it. And a lot of the metaphors that have been coming up this week have been about food. So I was like, I know who I need to speak to. Especially having seen the power of the way that you use food in the classroom. And there have been a mixture of metaphors. Some have been positive, some have been negative. But I wondered if perhaps you could begin by introducing yourself a little bit and saying something about yourself. And then I would love to hear your thoughts on food-enabled pedagogy that you've been developing.
I'm so happy to be here. And I'm very excited that I know you must be doing an amazing work right there. It's such a shame that I couldn't be part of it this year, but yeah, it's just great honor to be here and to be able to share this moment with you. So who am I? I'm a post-academic, I guess, if I may say so. I've been teaching at universities for the past 15 years, and majority of it has been at Warwick University. And then now I'm a post-academic, as in I'm no longer working for a university, but I set up a Unicorn Academy. So I continue as an educator, as a pedagogue, but I guess with slightly less pressure of time and less pressure of administrative work. And food-enabled pedagogy is something I've been working on since, I guess, more systematically since 4 years. My MA research was on participatory art projects, and I worked with artists who used food as a means of establishing relational aesthetics. And my PhD was on migrants and food, and how food can help us, all of us actually, to make a place, a space of dwelling, home. And then it occurred to me, while I was trying to work within the classroom and, with critical pedagogy, with feminist pedagogy, with open space teaching and learning, I realized we actually exclude something that is so obvious to our bodies, to our dreams, to our guts. It's food. So why not bring it on board? So food-enabled pedagogy came about like very naive question of, first of all, why do we exclude food from the learning spaces? It's so obvious. And second of all, from the question of trying to find embodied ways of generating a truthfully hopeful, embodied, differently hierarchical, if it has to be hierarchical in any way, kind of learning space. Yeah.
I love that idea of the relationship between food and creating spaces of dwelling. Could you say a little bit more about that?
So we kind of treat our learning spaces, or when I say we, clearly I exclude digital pedagogy lab participants and educators like yourself, Naomi. But like when we treat learning spaces, we kind of try to generate this extraordinary space and situation in which the whole focus is on learning, which is usually understood as a transmission of some sort of content from an expert to a receiver. And we all know it's a much more complex space, actually. So what does it mean, for example, to treat a learning space as a dwelling space? It means that everyone takes ownership of the space. It means that everyone takes authorship of the space. So this includes, like giving themselves the permission to reshape the chairs without anyone telling them, oh, by the way, it's okay to sit as a circle, or kind of taking the responsibility of each other. And there is this concept of holding each other, it's used, I guess, as part of contemplative pedagogies as well. So how can we actually empower all of us in the space to hold each other, to make that space a home-like space? And by suggesting to make it a home-like space, I'm not saying that we should all be in a 100% space of comfort. Far from that. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay to feel incomplete and fearful, but in a safer way, if it makes sense. And being aware, I guess what I'm trying to get at is like making that space a space where we can all be vulnerable and open, and starting from that to have any sort of discussion and building upon the knowledges that we bring into the space.
I love that, because it's so rare actually to hear the idea that it's okay to be uncomfortable. You know, and it raises questions for me about what becomes included in the space that's usually excluded when we allow food in.
So I guess depending on the context of allowing the food in, it can flirt with the concept of comfort and discomfort differently. There is a chance that I might have allergies, and it might create huge fear in my body and psyche if a friend brings, if a classmate or my instructor brings some sort of food that makes me feel, that puts me in a danger mode. It's possible, but I guess the kind of comfort that food brings is also quite fruitful, in the sense that it becomes already an act of deviance when you allow food in a space that has signs all over saying you are not allowed to bring food in, no food or drinks, you're not allowed to do that. And of course, learners do that occasionally as a deviant act on their own, right? But kind of saying this as the teacher or as kind of the facilitator of that learning space, and saying like, we're in this together.
An invited deviancy.
Yes, invited deviancy, which immediately reminds them, oh, wait a minute, I've got 7 hours of lectures today. She's got 7 hours of meetings plus lectures today. We didn't have time to grab food. So instead of doing this sneaky, dishonest thing, can we actually just consume food while we are learning? And actually, it quite surprises me that we don't allow food in the learning space without even reshaping it as a pedagogical tool. But the whole concept of symposium, in ancient Greek, was about having intellectual, formal and informal conversations around food and drinks. So allowing our bodies some level of comfort while our minds can engage with different things. So this comfort, I think we use it not good enough. I think there is a bit of stretch that discomfort allows all of us, which will be useful for all of us as learners. But then we use it, okay, I'm going to put your body in an uncomfortable situation, but then the mind is not able to focus, or the affect is not able to release itself and receive enough. Yeah.
One of the things we've been thinking a lot about this week is the idea of the hidden curriculum. And I wonder if you have a sense of what the hidden curriculum is around our bodies and around food in this way. What are we taught? It's not on the...
That. Yeah, that's one of the key features of actually why I thought I should theorize food-enabled pedagogy, because it has a huge hidden curriculum. Just a sentence of saying, when you enter that learning space, whether it's a studio, classroom, lab, no food or drink. That basically tells you, this is something you bring up a lot. Like when I have full bladder as a primary school child, for example, and I have to lift my head and take the permission of responding to this embodied need from a figure of authority, that's in itself is an extremely traumatizing message. At the university level, it's actually worse, I think, because on the one hand, we keep telling our young adult students that they need to be responsible for their bodies, for their actions and all this. And yet we put them in a situation where they can't respond to a very simple embodied need. And by the way, just to remind all of us, we are the ones scheduling 7 hours back-to-back lectures. So there is also this structural push that makes it even more absurd to not allow foods and drinks. I think another hidden curriculum of it, well, actually, this is something I realized after I asked lots of colleagues and university administration. So why do we not allow food? So one of the objections to bringing food is the argument that no one cleans after themselves. So this is also actually the part of the hidden curriculum, the assumption, the expectation that I don't respect your capacity to respect your learning space. And I think, it never happened in the courses that I was teaching. I never had to remind after any session where there was food involved, can you please clean after yourself? That almost comes, I wouldn't say naturally, but there is an ethic of sharing food.
But if we're thinking about dwelling and home as words that we're using about the learning space, then it becomes much more instinctive that, of course, we look after this space together.
Exactly.
And that's a shift in dynamic there, isn't there?
Definitely, because as soon as you bring food, you enact some sort of ownership of the space, setting a table.
And care.
Important performative act, and definitely care, because when they prepare the food, for example, they ask about each other's allergies, or before they serve it at least, even if they didn't get the chance to ask beforehand. And it immediately enacts gift exchange as well. And this is something I think we undermine a lot, because even when we come to the classroom as pedagogues with a PowerPoint, that's a gift. Our presence is a gift. And I'm not saying it from an entitled place, as in we are all amazing and then I'm a gift, but it's their presence is a gift. Like whatever we have to contribute to that space, and that day it might be tears, it might be an incomplete sentence. In my case, it might be a mispronounced concept, but we are gifts to each other. So food brings it so quickly to the surface without even needing to name it cognitively or conceptually, if that makes sense. And I think that ethics is very important for a critical pedagogy, for empowering everyone, and almost it even gives the chance of undoing some of the other structural hierarchies. It undoes some of the harms of gender dynamics. It undoes some of the dynamics of whiteness, or because we are differently empowered when it comes to food. And just the generosity of bringing something to the classroom brings this almost like a, not fully equalizing, we can go down the rabbit hole if you'd like to, but it does kind of level each other and our vulnerabilities and our gifts.
I'd like to talk about a specific example that I've seen of this, the transformative impact of this. Teaching Reinventing Education with you, one year we had a particularly fraught cohort. I think there was a lot of the sense of them not feeling seen by each other and not feeling heard, and a lot of underlying trauma that was influencing the space, but perhaps not being given voice or not feeling heard in important ways. A sense that they were having to compete in their trauma somehow, perhaps. And it came kind of to a head one week. And so then you and I had a conversation about how to respond. I can't remember where the idea came from, but the idea was that the following week you would lead this session on food with food. And it was extraordinary. I have never seen anything in the classroom like that. This group of people who the previous week it had felt they might even come to blows almost. We all sat round together and we shared food. And I remember a particular moment in which somebody realised that you'd said earlier that this was the last crop of bulgur wheat that had come from the garden of your late grandparents. And oh gosh, there was a hush and an awe in the room. And it was it became a sacred space. You created a sacred space there, and the dynamic of that group was completely transformed going forwards. And I would love to hear your reflections on that specific instance, but for me that brought together so many of the things that you've just been talking about, the sense of the gift of what you were sharing and the sacredness of this, the last tastes of this garden that you were sharing with the students, and the power of that as gift was extraordinary. I'm sure you remember that session.
I do, yes, I do remember. And it's funny, isn't it, how naturally it came to both of us, but how much they appreciate it, because they are in lack of receiving gifts as learners. So I guess I noted more of that as like it gave me pain more than pleasure, if it makes sense. As in, why were they so surprised? Like, why did they think this was a huge gift? You know what I mean? It came naturally to us to set up that table, and I remember you bringing something very special to that space as well, if you'd like to share that. So I guess in the transformation that we allowed, the whole event was quite important, on top of what we brought as you and I as the facilitators of that learning space. They each brought extremely different things, and one of them prepared something, the other one did actually forgot to bring something and ran to the supermarket. And suddenly the assumed hierarchies of cooking something or buying something ready-made, even those were unmade, because they shared individual stories about why they brought those edibles or drinkables. And suddenly they were able to see each other from an entirely different angle. So the week before, there was this explosion of energy which couldn't channel itself. And as you just mentioned, there was almost like a competition among traumas based on gender, based on race, based on other things. And suddenly we were in a quite intersectional space, intersectional understanding of, oh, wait a minute. It's as simple, I'll use a food analogy, but it's as simple as this. Oh, wait a minute, you're allergic to this and I'm allergic to that. Or I don't like the smell of this, but I'm okay with you eating it. And you know, I can't digest this, but I see how you can. You've got the gut bacteria for it. And if you remember in that session, is everyone 18 plus? Can I use some words?
Yes, yes.
So if you remember in that session, we discussed shit as well.
I remember.
And this possibility of bringing food and remembering the journey of food in our bodies, but also in the world, from earth to tables, etc. But also like some remembering that it becomes shit. Whatever comes into our bodies gets digested. We've got this capacity to digest it and make it into shit. But our shit is also a fertilizer. And this part is something that you keep reminding me. You know, there's the possibility of composting things that are discarded, that don't seem to be part of the meal or the main thing. I feel like I'm diverging a bit, but
well, no, I don't think you are, because what I remember really strongly about that is you asking the question of, why doesn't our education system teach us how to know if we're well by looking at our shit?
Yeah.
And for me, that was such an interesting moment. For a start, there was the way that the room responded when you used the word shit, and the kind of like frisson of like, where is this going now? But then the way that it felt like the whole room was floored by that as a question, and that question of, what is the purpose of education? What would you say that for you the purpose of education is?
Well, can I just come back before responding to that? That it was a very conscious intervention, right? Using the word is about kind of trespassing the boundaries of the jargons, of the academic jargons that we force upon ourselves, or what we understand knowledge to be. So me knowing post-structuralist thought has enriched me in, in innumerable ways, in ways that I can't even pronounce. During a pandemic, how useful it was that I can quote Deleuze and Guattari, and I read the rhizomatic effects of the situation when I was told by the health system that, you've got the symptoms, stay at home. What if I knew how to read my shit? And as a metaphor, that sentence makes sense as well. We are not taught how to read our own shit. We are taught how to learn other people's shit in jars, and then we compare ourselves constantly to an outside source of knowledge and criteria. So the purpose of education, I think, in especially within a particular, post-enlightenment setting, has been to teach us conventions of a profession, jargons of thinking, and of course, critical thinking, creativity, versatility. These are all part of our learning outcomes, but we don't even allow the spaces to be open enough to allow these faculties that are already inherent in all of us, by the way. We don't even allow these faculties to find fruition. Instead, we push our students to replicate models of critical thinking, models of creativity. And I find what you keep reminding me and all of us quite valuable. It's not about empowering students or learners. It's about getting rid of the structures that disempower them, and that connects to Brené Brown, who we like quite a lot of. So that courage, creativity, that fire, light that is within all of us in a learning environment gets shut off, because it's more about learning the academic writing style and putting your dots and commas in the right place. And it's about performing an academic expertise rather than truly being innovative human beings. So in an ideal world, the purpose of education would be to enable that encounter with oneself, including one's shit, including one's vulnerability. But unfortunately, in the current, in the current majority conventions of doing things, it's more about how do you hide the color of your shit to perform health every day, mental, physical? How do you perform expertise? How do you claim being better than the person sitting next to you, as opposed to opening up spaces of gratitude? I am grateful that you are challenging me. I am grateful that you just shouted at me. I'm grateful that you just allowed your passionate energy to come at me. So that encounter space. And yeah, this is something you and we discuss in terms of co-teaching scenarios as well. How comfortable are we calling each other on our bullshit, for example? How comfortable are we, when we, in our individual space, when we have blind spots? Like, do we feel bruised when, do I feel bruised when Naomi tells me, yeah, you said that, or you did that, but do you remember this was your ideal? Or, because we are human, like we have accidents, or we are fallible. So, and I think in a co-teaching scenario, well, co-teaching's purpose within education can sustain education's, deepest core goal of that enabling that encounter, and that like taking that vulnerability and actually making it a point of, I'm okay with my vulnerability.
Absolutely. It's interesting to me that I found it so much more difficult teaching reinventing education singly. And I think part of the reason for that is that you and I aren't there together modeling ways of disagreeing with each other and of challenging each other. And so moving students from that place of deference takes much, much longer, and building up that trust. Because in the classroom, if I say something and you're like, what? and then I respond in a positive, like, oh, of course, thank you. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it in that way. Or I respond of like, yeah, no, I see where you're coming from, but I disagree. Then that is modeling. There's a whole other kind of hidden curriculum there that's being modeled in that collaborative teaching and learning, and it's a decentering and dethroning. It's a kind of implicit permission for them to disagree with us, and for them to find their own position, because we are modeling having different positions and engaging with each other's ideas.
Definitely. And would you agree that that is, to me, that's kind of the best way of teaching criticality as well? It's not about holding on to your ground. It's the capacity to be able to say, oh, wait a minute, I just changed my mind after I've been exposed to what Naomi shared. I didn't have access to that piece of knowledge beforehand. Now I do. Oh, yes, Naomi, I didn't think of, what I just said had these kind of implications. And I guess in our case, the fact that we, at the beginning of the module, we occupy the authority expert space of the teacher, and you and I, we both undo that, right, in front of their eyes. And that's another message as well. That also re-empowers them, I guess, or gets rid of the disempowerment that the hierarchy creates. Because whatever challenge we have for each other, that is truly a gift. It doesn't steal from our identity. So our opinions, our temporary knowledges are not our identities. And we don't have to know everything. Yeah.
I find that very powerful, and I think that's one of the reasons that it was so exciting to teach in that way, because it, for me, has been the clearest example that we teach who we are, that it's not about content, and that being able to be together in the classroom in that way, as educators, facilitating that space, allowing each other to be in different ways, holding each other in being, in difference together, I have found to be much, much more transformative than anything that I've ever done with content.
I think you said something amazing that just gave me goosebumps again. Being in difference with each other. It's not even being different from each other or accepting each other's differences, but being in difference with each other. And I think that is much more valuable than imposed consensuses. Consensus? What's the plural of consensus? You read my mind, please.
Consensus? I don't know. Like.
Yes, but you know what I mean. Like, it's much better, and I think it's more conducive to a genuinely democratic culture, as opposed to tyranny of the majority, which democracies all over the world kind of started being about. It's not just about creating communities of people who fully agree with each other, or who fully feel comfortable with each other. That there is actually less learning opportunity in those situations. I think what's amazing is to be in difference with each other and remain in difference with each other, which is fine, but being able to still feeling okay enough to vocalize that difference without attacking. And yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to share a more negative food metaphor that I've encountered. I'm sure you have too. And then if it's all right with you, we'll come to a close, and I'll ask you if you've got a message or a challenge that you'd like to share with this amazing group of educators who've come here to think about how we do this stuff online. Not this stuff that's already almost impossible, but possible, but almost impossible. How do we do that online? But I think we've talked about this before. A couple of years ago, I was talking about education with a group of students, and one of them was talking about exams, and they said, it just feels like you go in to a space and you have to regurgitate knowledge. You go into the exam, you regurgitate, and you leave. And I was like, wow, that's a powerful metaphor. Let's think about what that metaphor means, and let's think about the implications of that. If you're going in and regurgitating, you're vomiting up what you've learned. What does that mean about how you've been learning it? And they started to talk about things like binge eating and eating as fast as they could and just stuffing themselves. And I said to them, how do you feel afterwards? Like you go into the exam and and they said, well, it's kind of like that feeling of like when you've eaten too much and then you're sick, there's kind of a bit of a sense of relief, but also you feel kind of gross. And then afterwards I started thinking about, well, no wonder people don't like marking if what we're doing is marking vomit. You know, how well have you vomited? What quality of vomit is this? And then we're being pressured to give more detailed feedback on the vomit, as to how students can vomit better in the future. It seems like the idea of regurgitation is quite a dominant metaphor in education in many spaces, and I'd love your insights on that side of metaphor and food.
I think that side of the metaphor is extremely productive, and we should keep that too, especially because it resonates with our bodies. You know, when I was listening to you, my body was already remembering the discomfort of vomiting. And, you know, when you said marking vomit, that's exactly how we react. So why not keep that disgusting, hurtful metaphor as it is, and remind ourselves and our learners that the purpose of our educational encounter is to digest, and it's to scavenge hunt ingredients, and it's to cook together occasionally things that we brought from our own garden, things that we grew, or sometimes things we just stumbled upon, and occasionally we'll get poisoned, but give ourselves the chance to digest. And let's also build a sense of safety that when we get poisoned or when we give an allergic reaction, we have the strength to analyze it, to process it. And shitting is a great gift given to all of us. Anything that doesn't serve our bodies, minds, our souls, we can just digest and let go of the undigested. So maybe I guess I lost the capacity of thinking is like in positive or negative, or this is a bad metaphor kind of ways, because whatever source of hurt there is, whatever source of pain, physical or emotional, there is always an opportunity for growth. And I think food taught me that, because food has its own agency, pedagogic agency as well. There is no failure when it comes to cooking. I mean, even burning a food or over salting it is not a failure. And I'm thinking of the specific occasion where I was trying to make it potato salad, as my mom does. And instead of cumin, I put curry because the colors are similar. And I wasn't cooking mindfully, if you excuse me, in that occasion. And suddenly I discovered a whole new taste, with curries and the rest of the spices coming from my mom's repertoire. So what's really failure in a teaching and learning space as well, as long as we kind of know we'll digest whatever comes in, and undigested shit will leave our bodies and souls.
And it's okay occasionally to stick stuff in the bin and learn how to not do it next time as well.
Yes, and also just to remind all of us, shit is good for the environment. So it will be the fertilizer for other beings. So it's not even like we're doing something useless outside of the market economy. It has a purpose in life. It will go somewhere. So,
ecosystem, yeah. So is there like a parting idea or challenge or wish or intention or something that you'd like to share with this group of educators who have taken this week out together to think about how we together can think about doing this education thing better?
Yes, big question. But maybe maybe the invitation is to try food out despite the online things. So maybe each one of us, we can try to be virtual chefs. Maybe we can give recipes to our learners and ask to have a symposium online where they share their favorite foods. I guess the main invitation is to come back to our bodies and see what we derive pleasure out of, whether it's food, whether it's something else. And if there is explore if there is a way of bringing that in the learning space. And you might be surprised, a lot of the time they are. We just don't give ourselves permission to do that. So yeah, I guess that's it. And by the way, I don't know if it's appropriate, but I would love to hear from anyone who have, who have used food stories, cooking, or yes, any experiences on that. I would love to hear from anyone. Can I show
Could
my?
you share? Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say, would you like to say a little bit about your what is it, organization that you've established now?
Oh, about Unicorn Academy.
Yeah.
It's like an educational circus where I'm working with individuals, like early careers, PhDs. For now, I don't have anyone that I work with from undergraduates yet. So I work with individuals, almost like a coach, to let them navigate this system while remaining themselves. And then I have workshops on creativity, well, everything that you all do, everything that we do, but to kind of packaged kind of as a group workshop that is on top of their curriculum. Because for years I worked with law and business students who were not given as part of their curriculum this chance, this permission to be silly, to be themselves, to be creative, which is so crucial for their line of work. So yeah, that's what I do in Unicorn Academy, I think. I'm just trying to bring magic to learning spaces, and I'm hoping this will make sense to you.
Oh, it does. Do you want to share your email? And
I'm sharing my email, and the reason why it looks like a 5 years old handwriting is because I wrote it from the other way. This is what happens when I write.
Oh, see, I'm seeing the first one backwards, but the second one forwards. So that now I'm seeing it backwards. So if you share the other one as well, then we can make sure we've definitely got it the right way around. Perfectly. Perfect.
Yeah. So actually,
Yeah.
you've got normal screen.
Yeah, I think it must be flipping.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I think it must be flipping it around for me. Yeah, it's confusing, isn't it?
Something.
It's another dislocation of the online space. Nese, thank you so much for your generosity and the gifts that you've shared with us today. It's been, as ever, challenging, hopeful, slightly terrifying, and magical. All at the same time.
I hope you have an amazing rest of the week and you keep tickling each other's brains.
Yes, we're trying to be gentle with each other. But yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.